special occasion for us to welcome him back, and it's going to be specially filmed, hopefully to end up being on television sometime. So it's part of a larger project, and next week when you'll come, I think you have to sign a release or something about being on television and so on as part of the audience. But so I'd really encourage you to bring a friend next week or tell people about the rest of the lecture series. Reminder to people, if you double parked, then you need to leave at 6:30. And for anyone who doesn't want to have that problem in the future, you are welcome to park in the gas station right over here next to us. So you want to be able to get out quicker that way. If everything works according to plan, the police will be here at 6:30 to drag me off. No, I mean to allow people to get out of the parking lot. Okay, I think that's all the business, except I hope you invite others to come to the series. So we'll now roll the cameras and begin the lecture. My name is James J. Basic, and I'm here to publicly confess that I am indeed a workaholic. I have been a workaholic ever since the age of 17, when I discovered that I would never make it as a Major League Baseball player. I am now 50 years old, and have been dealing with this burden for many years. And I'm thinking of this lecture tonight as I also lie a little about my age. I'm thinking of this lecture as the first step in overcoming this particular problem. My problem is that I have trouble doing things just for fun. So some of you might have seen me jogging out in front here when you came in. That was not for fun. That was to relieve stress and tension. So I watch movies in order to get homily material. And I play golf in order to cultivate the virtue of humility. So I'm addressing this lecture to myself and to two other people. I will tell you the two other people that I'm addressing in this lecture. The first other person is Esther. Esther is a single mother raising two children. She has a job as a teacher. She figures she has about a half hour a day for herself. By the time she gets her kids ready in the morning and gets them off to school and goes and teaches herself and picks them up and prepares a meal and tries to prepare her classes for the next day, she is consumed with that work all day long, and she has about a half hour a day, she figures, for herself. And as spring comes now, Esther is feeling a great sense of nostalgia for what she remembers from the past. She has all of these images of when she was younger and they went to the beach in the summer and they had a lot of leisure time and they just hung out and didn't have a whole lot to do. And that's like a distant memory to her. It's a nostalgic feeling, but she's getting so that she can hardly bring that back. She can hardly even remember what that was like anymore, to have that kind of leisure time and to be involved in play, in spontaneous fun, and so on. The other person that I address this to is Isaac. Now, Isaac has his life well in order. He's a successful career. He passed up an opportunity to move up the corporate ladder so that he could have more time for his family and for himself. Makes less money, but he made that clear decision. Isaac in the summer will play golf at least a couple times a week. In the other part of the year, he's involved in a couple of bowling leagues. He gets about 5 weeks vacation a year. He can, any goes off and does different things. His wife lets him be very free about having time for himself. If he wants to go out and play poker with his buddies, that's fine with her. So he has very great freedom that way, and a lot of leisure time, and you'd say that Isaac plays a lot. But if you asked Isaac if that had anything to do with his spiritual life, he would look at you quizzically. Isaac's a Catholic. He comes to church regularly. He tries to get something out of the Mass. But the idea that there would be a connection between what goes on at Mass and his time on the golf course is totally foreign to him. There's no sense of those coming together in any way. So my talk is addressed to Esther and Isaac and me. Talk is entitled Spirituality and Play. This whole series is about spirituality, and I use spirituality in a lot of different ways. It's a hard word to pin down. One way of thinking about it is that it's a participation in the death and rising of Christ in His paschal mystery. It's to share in that rhythm of the life of Christ. Another way to think of it in broader secular terms is it's an attempt to find a deeper meaning in life, to achieve some sort of integration, some wholeness, to have a large sense of purpose that galvanizes our energies and gets us into motion. And we can think of spirituality as having a lot to do with our relationships, how we get along with other people, what kind of serenity we have about ourselves and our own being, how effective we are in our relationships with other people, how loving, how caring, how compassionate. And of course it has everything to do with our relationship with the Gracious One, who is in charge of the whole world. The other word in the title is play. It's really quite hard to know exactly what word play means. I learned its meaning from reading books myself. I read a lot of different authors about play. In fact, I listed some of them there, and they tell you what play is. But clearly that play has to do with human activity that's self-contained, that has its purpose within itself, not for something else. So if I say I watch movies in order to get homily material, then that's not play for me. That's work. So play has to do with activities that have their meaning within themselves. We do play not for some other reason, but because it's fun, because it's pleasurable. And in play, we notice a certain freedom. We feel a spontaneity. We're able to let go. There's a certain adventuresome sense in play. Try to distinguish play from work. Work is purposeful, trying to accomplish something, got goals and so on. Play has its own rules, its own time, its own playground. It's one of the important questions. Where are our playgrounds? It has its own playground. And it's essentially supposed to be engaging. I often say that the child is the model for play. I'm coming to not like that at the moment, because I think we've got to find a way to play as adults. You can learn something from children. Jesus said that, didn't he? Like, look at little kids, supposed to learn something from them. So I'm sure we learn something about play from little kids because they're immersed in it, because they're engaged, because they're not worrying or thinking about a lot of other things, what went on yesterday or is going to happen tomorrow. That's something we surely can learn. But if we're going to have a spirituality of play, it's got to be an adult spirituality. You can learn something from the kids, but adult play is going to look a lot different. One way I have of thinking about all of this is to try to develop a playful spirit. Playful spirit's going to help us to deal with all of these various problems that Esther's got and that Isaac's got and that I have in approaching this topic. As I say, I listed in the thing for people who want to read about this, I listed some of the important works, from my viewpoint anyway, that you can do further reading on those. So the classic work really on play is the one by Johann Huizinga. I list first Homo Ludens, that's Latin for man playing, the human person playing, Ludens. That would be the most important work, I suppose, in this whole area. Well, then I try to do a little history of this, and I'm not sure how important that is to anybody, except to contrast the way the Greeks saw it with the way we see it. You know, Plato said that play was really what was essential about life. And Aristotle thought that we do work in order to have leisure. Many of us, it's like we have leisure and so we can get back and go to work. It's at least the way the workaholic sees it. If I'm going to take some time off, it's to recharge the battery so I can get back to work and do what's really important. The Greeks saw it another way. They thought that enjoying leisure, what was really important in life, having philosophical conversations and celebrating the Olympic Games and being involved in the political activities. That's what was really important to them. And they worked, or had slaves do the work. It wasn't an ideal society by any means. They had the slaves do the work so that other people could really enjoy leisure. Well, as you look through the whole history of this thing, it got reversed. Probably we'd look at the Enlightenment, 17th, 18th century, as being an important part of this, the rise of science and purposeful living, and we're going to build a better world, rise of humanism, urbanization, got to survive, make a living, accomplish things. And so we got going a whole other approach to life, where the whole business wasn't to enjoy the leisurely activity of philosophical discussion, but it was to be successful, to be effective, to make a difference, to accomplish things. Leisure, play was fit into that in one way or another. Now it's interesting to play this off in terms of Catholic Protestant emphases. John Calvin being especially important. John Calvin's a pretty sober person. When he said he did a little playing a few minutes on Sunday afternoon, that was about the extent of it. He was working the rest of the time and creating a theology that ended up in the United States saying that we know we're close to God if we're working hard. You keep your nose to the grindstone. That became not just the way to get ahead, but that was the way you knew you were right with God. That's how you got into a position where you were in the kingdom, you're among the elect, and everyone could tell it because you're hardworking and industrious, and you accomplish and get things done. Well, the Catholic immigrants came to the United States with quite a different attitude. Those are people who have traveled in Europe in the past, and think of in Italy, they close shops down in the middle of the afternoon, right at the prime business hours, and go take a nap. I mean, strange activities like that don't make any sense in our Puritan culture. But I'd like to think that Catholic immigrants kept alive, and thus somewhere in our bones and bloods is an antidote to workaholism. Somewhere floating around in the Catholic community, there's another outlook that says fun is important, that wherever there's the Catholic sun does shine, there is merriment and good wine, that there is time for leisure. I pointed to the Polish wedding as an example. Harvey Cox was always taken with Catholic celebrations because of their excess. He's a Baptist, as you know. Harvey's Baptist, teaches at Harvard. And what took him about Catholics was they were excessive. Well, they drank too much and partied too much and gambled too much and had too long of festivities and all of that. So there was something remaining in the Catholic imagination, often sort of stifled by the Protestant work ethic, but I think still somewhere around. So we get down to our own time and the situation of Esther and Isaac and others as well. We're working more hours. There's a study by Julia Shore at Harvard, Overworked American. I think she figured, if I got remembering it correctly, that we now are working harder than the Japanese and the Germans, and working about a month longer in a year than those other people are. So this is quite remarkable. I mean, we've become such a work-oriented society that we sort of hardly recognize it anymore. And part of the problem is that then sports or play that we look to becomes more organized and more difficult. Sports are important for a lot of us. They are an outlet. They're the way we bonded with our parents, perhaps. They're great for socializing, and so they're wonderful. And I don't like to say much against sports, except if you're honest, you can see the dark and shadow side of it. So we've got these amazing salaries, and it's $250 million that A-Rod makes now, and for his contract. I mean, that's sort of out of sight, and part of the contract is that any other baseball player signs for a higher amount during that period, they're going to match it and exceed it. That single event, the signing of Alex Rodriguez, speaks so much about how games and sport goes in our culture. His contract says if anyone else signs for more than that $250 million, that's with a B, dollars, then he's going to get more than they get automatically. So that says something about sports. A lot of our athletes on campus here don't graduate. We organize our kids' play to a high degree. Well, that's just got parents out of control at kids' ball games, so on. Well, what's all that about? How are we to understand this problem today? Well, one thing is we see there's a developmental cycle pattern that many people fall into. That is, kids play. That's fine. We subsidize them and give them free time to play. Then you get to be an adult and you work. And you work really hard and keep going as long as you can until you get retired. And then when you retire, you can play again. That's how we see it, isn't it? That's pretty how it is. Many people see it exactly like that. And of course, what that does is rob the whole adult period of whatever is of value in this whole idea of play and what that's all about. So whatever we're going to say about spirituality of play, we have to challenge that sequential life cycle as it's played out in our culture. But I suppose worse is what happens to Esther. Esther listens to Dr. Laura. Esther now defines herself as her kid's mom. A very destructive thing for Esther to do. She defines herself that way. That's how she sees herself. That's who she is. She is her kid's mom. She is the one who's got all this work to do to take care of them. She's the one who has to support them. That's how she defines herself. And that becomes the great problem in a work-oriented culture and a society that's totally work-dominated. We begin to see ourselves as functionaries. We begin to see ourselves as essentially workers. That's what Marx said, and that's what others said. We are economic people. So we get our self-worth in terms of how successful we are in the work world. What kind of accomplishments that we make. And We pay large dollars to people who are successful and good workers, efficient, can accomplish goals. And so life begins to look to us like a series of goals that we have to achieve, one after another. You achieve this one, you get through college, then you got another one to achieve. And it's just a whole series of goals down the line, and the whole job of life is to figure out how to accomplish them. In this kind of world, everything is instrumental. Everything is for the sake of something else. People jog not to have fun, but to get rid of tension. Or watch movies to get homily material. It has no intrinsic value in itself. It's all instrumental. It's all for the sake of something else. If you live your whole life always for the sake of something else, you're going to really work harder and harder and harder so I can save more and more money so then I can play again when I retire. It's a strange cycle, and it looks pretty, the right word, supply the word, then when someone dies at 65, 3 weeks after they retired. It's poignant, I guess. I don't know what the right word is. Sad. Highlights the misguided character of that whole approach to life. Identify ourselves with the job. Who's Esther? She's her kid's mom. Identifies herself with a role. Who am I? I'm the priest. Identification with the role. This is not a healthy way to live. And when this happens, some people in the culture then get obsessed with work. They become people we call workaholics, where become unable to play, unable to relax. Some people get more nervous when they have leisure time. We have a Sunday syndrome that sometimes people don't have anything to do on Sunday afternoon. They don't know what to do with themselves. They get nervous when there's time that isn't programmed or goal-oriented. It's trouble being spontaneous and going with the flow and so on. Lose creativity, lose a real sense of freedom. In that kind of culture, not only does Esther have a problem, but Isaac does as well. Because his life is bifurcated, it's dichotomous, it's two things that are going on: work, religion, and play, leisure. He has no sense of how those go together. They don't fructify one another. They're not connected. Just like for some people, religion isn't connected with their work. There's a dichotomy between liturgy and everyday work activities, no connection. So it's possible to have no connections, like Isaac's situation, with the world of play and leisure. Okay, so that represents the problem. That's addressed to Esther, Isaac, and myself. And anyone else who might find themselves in any way in those descriptions. No, if you can't find yourself in those descriptions, then it'd be good to take a nap or go move your car now. I have here my golf glove, which I was going to put on at this point to remind me of the importance of play. However, I'm not going to do that. So, I want to talk about the theology of play. What this essentially amounts to is thinking about Christianity from the viewpoint of play. Now, that's an odd thing to do. I mean, we think about it from the viewpoint of truth, or the viewpoint of goodness, how it helps us to be good, live an ethical life, and so on. So what does it look like if we think of the whole theological enterprise from the viewpoint of play? Well, before I do that, just to give a little bite for this, I always say that Aristotle said if you want to know what justice is, you go find a just person. Watch them. So I said, where am I going to find a playful person? Be good. So anyone thinks of a playful person. I really couldn't think of anybody very good, but the one I chose is back on the wall there, Thomas Merton. And I chose him not because he figured this all out, but because he refused to escape from the problem. He continued to fight his way through it. He was a compulsive writer, you know. He had to write. Abbott didn't want him to write. He had to write. I don't know if he thought it was fun or not. I don't really think so. Had to. He's a compulsive. And yet he struggled to keep alive the playful side of life. Here's one I like. This is entitled A Signed Confession of Crimes Against the State. This is Thomas Merton, Trappist monk, model on the wall, died in 1968, etc. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Here's one part of A Signed Confession of Crimes Against the State. I confess that I am sitting under a pine tree doing absolutely nothing. I have done nothing for 1 hour and firmly intend to continue to do nothing for an indefinite period. I have taken off my shoes. I confess that I have been listening to a mockingbird. Yes, I admit that it is a mockingbird. I hear him singing in those cedars, and I am very sorry. It is probably my fault. He is singing again. This kind of thing goes on all the time. Wherever I am, I find myself the center of reactionary plots like this one. Countercultural against a work-oriented society. So, what happens if we think about ourselves as players instead of workers? Players. So we begin to think of ourselves like that. We think of ourselves as receptive. What's important about us is not just that we can actively change the world, but that we can receive from the great God. That we are fundamentally open. That we should be characterized by spontaneity. That we should allow God to address us by name and to enter into conversation with that God. So we have the capacity to listen to the Spirit whispering within us. We are not just producers from this viewpoint. We're not just wage earners. Women are not just their kids' moms. We are recipients of a call from God. We have the capacity to contemplate the world, to enjoy beauty, to let ourselves be touched. We have the capacity to be adventuresome, to be creative. If we're really players, then we have a light touch and a playful spirit. Then in this viewpoint, we are in the hands of the great God, and she comforts us and cares for us. And that releases the child in us. It releases this other approach to life so that we can feel secure in the grasp and the hands of the great God. If we are players or have this playful spirit, then we can have a sense of humor. We could actually laugh at ourselves and our own foibles. We don't have to take everything with absolute seriousness. We would be people who can laugh as well as cry. There's some Clement of Alexandria. The fathers of the church were big on this. You'd be amazed at how much they talked about play. Especially the Eastern fathers, Clement of Alexandria. I got one of them, said that the true believer faultlessly plays to the end the part in the drama of life for which God has cast us. We play out a drama with God. Well, it's a play. Life is a play. They say that kind of thing often. This is indeed the play of the children of God. It's all connected with freedom. If we think of ourselves as really free, not just programmed to produce and accomplish, but truly free, then that allows us to play with spontaneity. Then it all feels different. In playing, we are neither master nor servant. We play with nature, can sit and listen to the mockingbird, can sit and enjoy nature, but then nature will play back with us. Nature will speak to us of the great God. So, that is a way of trying to get at something about how we would think of ourselves. Instead of active doers, accomplishers, we would think of ourselves as receptive, open, as fundamentally players in the game of life. Now I want to do something somewhat risky. So as part of play, I thought I should risk something. This is the first of my 8 steps of overcoming workaholism. I like efficiency. If you can do it in 8, why do it in 12? That's my theory. So I have an 8-step program, which by tomorrow will become a 4-step program. I do not mean this to be offensive, okay? I make a disclaimer to begin with. If it's offensive, I apologize. This is out of the book Jürgen Moltmann, Theology of Play, and it's a response by Robert Neal, former professor of mine at Union Theological in New York. So he asked the question, how did God become man? He says, as everyone knows, the Lord God was accustomed to spend his mornings reading the Torah, his afternoons regulating the affairs of people, and his evenings playing with the Leviathan. Nice life God had here. As the days passed and passed and passed, the mornings became so tedious and the afternoons so frustrating that even the delights of play began to pale. Though God was essentially bored. The Lord wondered if an event could come to pass. Something to get him excited. Get him engaged again. Well, it did. On that day, he had sat on his golden throne as usual in all power and majesty and surrounded by angels in solemn assembly. At midday, he put aside the Torah. He rose and stepped forward with the intention of looking down onto earth and checking up on humankind. The little cherubim had just finished lunch. The Lord God slipped on a banana peel and tumbled head over heels into the world. He became man. Robert Neal goes on to say, if this story bothers you, then stop reading the rest of this book. All language about God is symbolic. All stories about God point to a mystery that's always beyond our ability to comprehend it. Feminist theologians have raised up for us a really important idea. Part of it's based on that passage from Proverbs 8:30-31, where it talks about Sophia. It's the Greek word for wisdom, a feminine word. Sophia says, then was I beside God as his craftsman, and I was his delight day by day. And this is the New Translation. Playing before him all the while, playing on the surface of his earth, and I found delight in the human beings. So right at the beginning we see this idea in the Scriptures that God was playing at the beginning. It's wisdom, could identify wisdom with the Spirit, might identify Sophia with the Logos, could do it a lot of different ways. But the idea is God is playing at the beginning of the world, that the creation has to do with God's exuberant delight, that He makes this world, it's like an overflowing of His fun He's having. And that's how this world comes to be. And God rejoices in this world, like an artist who's completed the painting, rejoices and says, "Oh, I made something really good. I can have a lot of fun with this world. This will be delightful. This is a lot better than sitting around just reading the Torah all day long. Oh, this is delightful." One of the Eastern Fathers again says, "The Logos on high plays." The word plays within the Trinitarian life, stirring the whole cosmos back and forth as He wills into shapes of every kind. Playful notion of what God is all about. And the world then becomes the glory of God. The refulgence of His majesty is reflected in the world. Creation is God's play. And the theology that stands behind this is that God did not have to create the world. It wasn't necessary. But God created the world out of love. We have the scholastic saying that love is diffusive of itself. It flows outward. This is the very way God is. Plays out the divine love. And that's this kind of world that we get as a result. I just made a note that various times you can see God playing. One way is he has a bet going. It's the beginning of the book of Job. God's got a wager with Satan whether Job will stay faithful or not when he's afflicted. It's a very odd thing. I mean, it's offensive in many ways, and it's hard to think in these terms. I just invite you to remember all religious language is symbolic. It's pointing to a reality beyond us. But it does have it. That's the setting. God's making a wager. A little bet going on whether Job will be faithful or not. Well, then we could think about Christ in these terms. Harvey Cox, who celebrated that Catholic excess and talked in his book Feast of Fools, talks about Christ as the harlequin, the clown. Some of you remember the movie? It was done back in 1966 for the World's Fair, I think it was, by the Protestant community. It's called The Parable. Do people remember that? Who remember people remember The Parable? Yeah, it portrays Christ as a clown. It's a clown going about doing good in various ways. Jesus did make a lot of wine. Cana, what is it, 150 gallons or something? Made a lot of wine. How about the bantering with the Canaanite woman? Do you hear anything playful in that? She wants him to help his daughter. We don't give to the dogs. We don't give goods to the dogs. Banter back and forth. Possible to see that as a way of Christ sort of playfully interacting with people. Fathers say that Jesus was our playmate, came to play with us in this world. Jesus wept, we know that. Scriptures don't tell us that he laughed, but one has to think of him as a complete person, fully integrated. I have to think that he had a great sense of humor, and that he was able to relativize therefore the things that weren't going perfectly, able to rise above them. So Christ as the clown figure. Interesting to reflect on all of that. The incarnation didn't have to happen. It's again, you get play when you don't have necessity. Work is necessary. You got to get to work to earn a living, to support the family. There's a necessity about it. Play indicates freedom. It might be important, but it's not necessary in the same way. And that's Moltmann, a Protestant theologian, very fine theologian, wants to stress that the incarnation was not necessary. It again flows out of the divine love. And then some talk about the church from the viewpoint of play. Again, I'm interested that the fathers of the church are very taken with the passage in Genesis where Isaac, which means laughter, again, that's a little humor. That's when Sarah conceives Isaac. She laughed when the idea, she was past menopause and she couldn't bear children, and she's told she's going to have children. She laughs, so she names her son Isaac as sort of a remembrance of that. And one day Isaac is with Rebekah, his wife, and the king watches them and he sees them playing in a familiar way, recognizes that they must be married. Rebekah means perseverance. So the fathers like to see Rebekah representing the church, taking delight and playing with Isaac, who represents Christ. Church in a playful relationship with the Lord. Zechariah, the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing. The fathers like to say that's how it will be, or should be, in the church. Playing of boys and girls. I don't know how this strikes you, but as stated a figure as Romano Guardini in our tradition, had an old chapter in a book on liturgy as play. Liturgy is play. And there is something about that. There's a role playing that goes on. If we say the creed, I mean, it's not the time to dissect the creed and say, do I really believe that part about descending into hell? I mean, we don't do that. When we're in the liturgy, we play the game. We say the creed. It's not the time for analyzing it. It's the time to get into it. To get into the whole liturgical game, a divine game, this liturgy. Well, this Mechthild of Magdeburg has got a whole bunch of great quotes about play. It seemed to be one of her favorite images here. She asked God to be open to her that swirling flood that plays within the Trinity. Isn't that interesting? A life of swirling activity, play within the life of the Trinity, by which alone the soul can live. We live by that energy flowing from the Trinity. And God says back to her, your soul shall experience my blessedness if it will lay itself trustfully in my divine arms so that I may play with it. Mechthild of Magdeburg, a great mystic. If you just open yourself, God is saying, then I'll play with you. You'll be my playmate. And then finally, I uncovered this, it's actually in Hugo Rahner's book. They had this in the Middle Ages, in France especially, and it actually lasted for quite a period of time. On the Feast of the Holy Innocents and on Easter, the bishop would get people together and they'd play ball. Now, I don't know what that meant, play ball to them at that time, but they would play some game together, Easter afternoon. And one of the games was that they would play is they would play the sacred music, and then they would walk the labyrinth like we have it here. They'd sort of be frolicking through the labyrinth, and they would have a ball that they would throw to one another as they're moving about through the labyrinth. So on Easter afternoon, our staff is going to gather right here. We have this ball, and we're going to frolic in the labyrinth right here, tossing the ball to one another. I have not yet informed them of this, but isn't that interesting? the element of play that really was at work. And dance, major image of the life of heaven. Again, Mechtil, the blessed in heaven, both filled and enchanted, sing for joy and laugh and leap in ordered dance. Dance was seen as the great image of heaven because in dance our soul and body are together. So we believe in the resurrection of the body and the immortality of the soul. So how do you express that combination in happiness? The favorite image of many of the mystics was the dance. The dance where the body reflects the spirit, where we feel integrated and together. So that's an attempt to think about play. I want Esther and Isaac to hear that. That's a foundation for how they're going to get themselves together here and how the 4-step program is going to work. Now, that leaves us with this whole more practical side of what are we going to do about all this, so on. Well, there's this interesting virtue that Aristotle talked about called eutrapelia. That will become the buzzword out of this whole lecture, eutrapelia. Just like I love the virtue epikeia, which is the virtue, Greek virtue for knowing how and when to break the rules, eutrapelia is the virtue of play, of knowing how to play right. Be a good playmate. How does one go about that? So Aristotle saw that as a virtue, eutrapelia, of how to enjoy oneself in relaxing activity. And Aquinas picked that up and said we need rest from our bodily labors and also from our mental activities. And so we need the virtue of play. Play will relax us. He says in one point that this virtue, eutrapelia, will let us turn deeds and words to relaxation. Try that one. He'll help us. This virtue, we got this virtue that even our work could be energizing. There's a way to work relaxed. There's a way to work in which we could be energized by it instead of drained. Now there we begin to get a really good answer for a lot of us in the virtue of eutrapelia. And let us turn the purposeful activities into a more relaxing mode, so they're not just draining, but could energize us. Another way of trying to get at what I think many of us need is this cultivation of a playful spirit. This is where we're trying to get rid of the great danger in our culture. We live in this total work culture, define ourselves by work, and then what happens? We take the work ethic into everything else we do. Even into family life, into friend relationships, into play. So play becomes work. A vacation becomes an extension of work. And so the way around this seems to be to develop this playful spirit. And when I try to describe that in some ways, what does it mean to have a playful spirit that we carry with us even during a tense work day, or that we would carry with us on the golf course, or the bridge table, or while doing gardening, or while traveling? Take with us a playful spirit. It'd bring a light touch to things. Wouldn't take ourselves with total seriousness. Laugh at ourselves. And be able especially to enjoy the moment. To live in the now. To drink in what's possible that God presents to us. That becomes one of the great touchstones for this whole spirituality, to live in the now. Enjoy the moment for what it is, and not for some future possibility. It begins to change life and begin to see things in a very different way. And of course, how do you get there? How do we try to get this more playful spirit going for us? It has a lot to do with prayer. There's an interesting correlation between play and prayer. In both cases, there ought to be some spontaneity. In both cases, there's a receptivity. There's a certain adventuresome character to it. There's great freedom in it. Prayer and play go together. And so if we're able to develop this more prayerful spirit, contemplate, be quiet, don't try to get anything done. The Lectio Divina, common way of praying, meditating, that means you sit down with the Scriptures or a spiritual book and you start to read it. But you don't read it with the goal of finishing the book. I'm going to finish the Gospel of Luke tonight. The whole purpose isn't to finish anything. The whole purpose is to read it till something grabs you and then to stay with it and to play with it. Play with it. Play with the meaning. Enjoy it. Delight in it. It might take all year to read the second chapter of Luke. It doesn't matter. The purpose isn't to finish the book. The purpose is to nourish the soul, to enjoy the moment, to delight in whatever God is saying to us at a given moment. In prayer is where Isaac has to make his linkage with his work and his play, both. That's it. There's the key for him. He has to see how those things go together, prayer and play, how they can fructify one another, whether they have things in common. So maybe he brings to his prayer his play. Maybe we thank God for the great lesson in humility on the golf course today. Learned a lot of humility. Thank you, Lord. This horrible round. So bring them together. And I think prayer and meditation reflection is part of the way to do that. Next, finding time for play. Now this becomes Esther's problem. One of the things Esther's going to do is get her kids to do a lot more work around the house. So what Esther does now is, after they eat, she has the kids trained, they do the dishes, and she goes for a walk by herself. She's now added on to the half hour that she had for herself. She now has another 20 minutes for herself in a given day, and she does this walk, and she uses it to pray and reflect and just enjoy being outside. She might even hear the birds and be involved in a subversive activity of just enjoying the walk together. I say here that if we really think it's important to play, then we'll find time for it. It's like anything else. If we're work dominated, we think that's the only thing that counts, then play will always get set aside, as is prayer, and it won't happen. We have to see its importance. Finding the right playground and the right type of play. We all need the right type of play, and part of finding that is to find what does indeed engage us. What will capture me? What will allow me to live in the moment? What will allow me to put aside the past and the future? What will engage my attention? What really interests me, holds me? Maybe that's the kind of play that I need to do. That might mean watching The West Wing on Wednesday night. It might mean walking in the woods, because that somehow is helpful. It might mean enjoying the moment at the dance and being involved in it. Finding the right place, an art museum to visit, I say, a church to celebrate liturgy, a bedroom for lovemaking, the places where one can be spontaneous, enjoy the moment, be immersed in what's happening, not just for the sake of something else down the road. Well, live in a work-dominated society. I don't think any of us escapes that. It's all just part of the whole business of life. One of the things that we want to do, it seems to me, is to develop what the one author calls these deep experiences. This is Diane Ackerman, Deep Play. Find it to be an interesting book. And she has a number of descriptions here of where play really does get us in touch with God. It functions like a signal of transcendence. It's a sign of the presence of God, in which all those things I've been saying about play get multiplied and intensified, so we're really engaged and really lifted out of ourselves. And the other time, the watch doesn't matter. I'm so involved in what I'm doing, I don't look at my watch. The liturgy is so prayerful and playful today that I forgot it went 10 minutes longer than usual. I'm immersed in it. Deep play, she talks about. Here's a guy who talks about that. Only he who has attained, this is a mountain climber, only he who has attained the summit and made himself one with it knows the solution of the mystery. So long as there yet exists a step to be taken, there are alternatives, and hence there are possibilities of comparison. But at the summit, all alternative routes become one. Every distinction between them, and therefore every opposition, is spontaneously reconciled. The summit itself not only occupies no space, although the whole mountain is virtually contained in it, but it is also outside time and all succession, and only the eternal present reigns there. This is an example of the deep religious experience, the deep play. Peter Berger wrote a book called Rumor of Angels, and he says play has a signal of transcendence, a rumor that angels are around. Because in play, it's the ninth inning of the ball game. And that's really what counts. No, it's the last hand in the bridge game. It doesn't matter what the clock says. And thus we're lifted out of ordinary time. And this other serious world of work is somehow set aside. And we know something new about possibilities and the beauties of life. And we begin to feel more integrated. Begin to feel like we could be playfully serious about life. We could be playfully serious after we know the top of the mountain and the peak experiences. Deep play helps us to develop that dialectical virtue. So the invitation is to think through spirituality of play and see how it challenges us and sets us up then maybe for all the rest of the lectures. We'll have 5 more, and you're welcome to come, and invite you to bring others with you, especially next week for Father Richard Vasco. We're going to take a couple minutes stand-up break. That allows people to leave. People who are double parked have to move your car. You want to stay, you could drive it over to the gas station, park there, and come back. And then we'll have microphones for people who want to make comments or ask questions. 2 minutes stand-up break.
There's a gold Concord sign company that's about to lock the gate.
Inside. Quick announcement, there's a gold Concord inside the sign company parking lot, and he's going to lock the gate. You will not get out. A gold Concord. Move it now. The sign man's going to lock the gate. 2 minutes stand-up break. I said it in 1 hour. I'm ready. right, could we reassemble? Question and comment period goes till 7. We'll end promptly at 7, if not before. We should have microphones. Is somebody walking around with microphones? Denise? Here we got Denise. We have somebody right here. And then somebody else could help with that mic for a minute, if you would, and take it to somebody who wants it so we don't have to wait. Anybody on this side will have a question, comment? There's a mic back there. Raise your hand. Suzanne, you're on. You got a mic.
When you began describing yourself as almost totally devoid of play, I thought to myself, a question which I wanted to ask you was, do you find your work fun and relaxing? Yes. And then when when you got to the end of your lecture and you got to eutrapelia, that was my answer for you.
Yeah.
That's totally you, right?
Yeah, I will comment on that. I think that, kidding aside in a sense, there's a remarkable way in which I find my ministry to be energizing. And I don't really always understand why that is. I know Saturday was a good example. I had 2 memorial masses and events afterwards, some counseling things, a mass at 4:30, 3 baptisms, and after that evening, I had a whole lot of energy to work on this talk. I call it thank you. You know, all you can say at the end of that is thank you. We should express gratitude to the God who playfully gives us energy. So, I mean, it's interesting to me. I often find the ministry to be energizing. I find that in doing counseling. And I believe the reason that happens, if I do it right, is if I am listening well and very attuned, I almost always am inspired. Even with people who got big problems and are struggling and ostensibly maybe got difficulties and so on, I don't seem to see that. I seem to find the strength or the inspiration in that. So I almost always find those kind of interactions to be energizing for me. I think I just, even all of that is even a little more remarkable since I am an introvert, and introverts find social situations to be draining. And so I can only attribute that to the playful God, the Spirit. There we got you got a mic? Chuck Turbley.
Yes. I wanted to comment that I think somebody has already, there is a contemporary figure died recently who I think has already, let's say, gotten a good start on the spirituality of play, and this is Henry Nouwen. One of his books was entitled Clowning in Rome.
That's right.
And he liked to hang around with circus performers, the whole event, a series of events in his life. But then also I wanted to comment on another thing. There is a book out just this year by Robert Reich, the former Secretary of Labor, entitled The Future of Success. And he makes the point in this book that the structure of society is set up to force us into this workaholism. We don't have any choice in it. I'll try to condense his argument in a sentence or two, and and say that it's all driven by competition, global capital competition, and you're either a workaholic or you're on welfare. That's the society we're going towards, and it's in structures of society that we need to change.
Hey, let me just comment on that. Chuck is pointing out Henry Nouwen. That's a great spiritual writer, as you know, deceased now. And we got a lot of his books in the library, don't we, Barb? And writes great stuff. And I think he writes it out of his own personal experience. And he spent a lot of times with the Larch community and people who are hurting and in one way or another mentally challenged and so on, physical disabilities. So he seemed to have a good sense of all of that. And be interesting to see in his own life. I mean, he writes autobiographically often, and I know he had his own periods of depression and so on, and his own personal struggles. Be interesting to see how he appropriated that personally with the whole play aspect. I'm glad you brought him up, and maybe other people will suggest other people we could look forward to the models. Like the Greek said, you want to know what a seriously prayerful or playful person is, or a playfully serious person, or the proponent of eutrapelia, then look around for people like that and learn from them. And, I don't think I'm going to want to pick Karl Rahner over there. And I don't see Dorothy Day that way. Therese of Lisieux now would be another story. She said, I quoted her, said she wanted to be a toy in the hands of God, like a ball that God could just throw off into the corner, which I find interesting. But finding the models is important. And then the societal analysis is absolutely crucial. I mean, we're all influenced by the society in which we live. And it's crazy to think we simply rise above it. You can't do that. And not only that, it's not just that we're forced into it, but it creates false consciousness. That becomes the really difficult matter. It's like I was trying to suggest that with Esther. Esther has forgotten what it was like to play. She hasn't played for so long. She's forgotten what it's like. In one sense, she doesn't know she misses it anymore, because she is so programmed and so caught up in her duties and what she has to do because of societal situations. So I would say extend Robert Reich's analysis into saying that not only does the structure program us, but the structure then affects our consciousness and the way we perceive the world. That's why you need a theology of play. That's why you need a Christian perspective out of the gospel that will just blow it apart. That's why you need Thomas Merton sitting there saying, I'm a subversive. That's the kind of language that makes sense when you're in danger of false consciousness. You need prophets to just kick us, just shatter it. That's probably why the story of God slipping on the banana peel could be effective, if people don't get upset by it. But I mean, it could be it's like radical, it's like strange, weird, that would get us to think in a different way. But you don't break out of false consciousness otherwise. You just think that's how the whole world runs. Everybody works like this all day long. Everybody's programmed like this. And if I'm lucky, I'll stay alive till I'm retired, and then I can have fun. We got one over here who's got a microphone. Are we passing microphones around?
I got a microphone over here.
Yeah, go.
I wanted to ask...
Then hit the hands, get to the hands of the... Yeah.
Actually, my question is a little bit related to this gentleman's.
Speak up into the mic.
My question is somewhat related to this topic. I wanted to ask that if the workaholics actually gave more time to play, and they thus would be working less hours, who would be doing their work, and would that actually give more job hours to people who are not employed?
Good. Well, there's all kinds of societal... First of all, the question is, if the workaholic had more hours, would the workaholic actually play? And part of my definition of the workaholic is they can't play. They can't relax. I mean, if they're on the golf course, they're thinking about the next business deal. The cell phone on the golf course right now is a major phenomenon. Unbelievable. So it's a question of can you relax? Even biologically, can you relax? Some people, when they get into a leisure mode, get anxious and nervous and get tension headaches when they're in the leisure mode because their whole bodily chemistry is geared up at this other rate. And we live at this pace, just going, and then you stop. Someone just told me that the other day. They terrible headache. Oh, why? I said, well, because I just stopped. I always get a headache when I stop. Because they're at a tremendous pace constantly, and then when they stop, their body chemistry doesn't know what to do with that, and it causes tense muscles and so on. But, I mean, yeah, there's other ways to structure things, aren't there? I mean, some companies, I think, rather play overtime to people than to hire more people. Something to think about. So I'm sure it's an economic kind of decision, but one way is not to have people working overtime and hire more people that would have more jobs. Surely there's many factors that would come into play in restructuring our society. Who's got a mic? Eileen's got. If you get the mic, then you get to talk. Mike Steele behind you will...
Well, Mike already has a mic.
Speak up.
As an expert in the area of religion and play, I would like to commend you on what appeared to me to be a playful and also remarkably well-researched presentation on play. And furthermore, I have a question, and I'd like to ask the question on behalf of my colleagues in the Toledo Institute for Religious Humor Studies. So if we could identify ourselves at this point, perhaps also stand up and acknowledge our investment in this particular...
Oh, good.
Doctors.
Where is Brian Sweeney here? Brian, yeah, just get this on film. Are the cameras going?
This is a serious question.
Well, I know. That's...
The question I put to you at this point in our question and answer period is active to contemplative life as work is to play, or is it the opposite? Is
active life to contemplative life as work is to play?
Or is it the opposite?
Or another thing. That's the question. Well, first, thank you for comments on the lecture. I had another plan. I wanted it to... you're right. The medium is the message. And I had another plan that revolves around equipment that didn't get in time. These slides that I was going to do. Slide presentation on play, but it didn't happen. So I was reduced to this prop. Anyway, thank you. Yes, I think I would take the analogy in the sequence that you put it, and I think you could make the parallels. But what would be most important to me is the solution. The solution in each case is a dialectical virtue. That is, how to be contemplatively active. Just like the solution is, how can you be playfully serious about work? How do you put the two together so you don't end up waiting to play till you're 65 and retired? So there isn't any solution that way. If you play them off against one another, you can't get any place. It's always sequential. It's always how much for this, how much for that. The solution is within ourselves to find a fruitful dialectic between the two, so that one could go to work and maintain a playful spirit. and that one could work at play in such a way that it would become truly relaxing, truly delightful, and truly spontaneous. Those things are not in opposition. And so that's why the prayerfully serious person, if I didn't like the words I ended up with there, but to find the right words to express that dialectic, that's within ourselves. I don't care how many hours I got to work on a day. That doesn't keep me from being a contemplatively active person, nor does it keep me from maintaining a playful spirit. It doesn't have anything to do with how many hours I got to work that day, because it's inside of myself where the solution is, to put that together and to carry it with me. And finally, I want to commend your group for one, swelling our crowd tonight, and for bringing a mirthful moment. Thank you. Who's got a microphone? Yes.
This is sort of a serious question.
Well, we're not open to those tonight.
Real serious. I was wondering what your take was on the fictional playful character in the recent movie by Roberto Benigni called Life is Beautiful, in which there was a playful character in extreme version. I was just wondering what your take on that was. I know it was controversial.
Oh, that's one of the few movies I haven't seen, but so I'm unable to comment. Almost any other movie you could have mentioned, I would have been able to comment on, but there's a lacuna in my movie going. I can't. I don't know. I know nothing. Maybe someone else can answer that question. Mike, you've been waiting to speak. I hope you can keep it in some relatively brief period.
Well, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't answer that gentleman's question. And I don't really have a question. Just this.
You want to be on camera, I know.
This remark. No, Father Basic. You know.
Speak into the mic.
I'm something like a reformed agnostic, not fully practicing even that. But I do like to stop in and hear these speeches from time to time, and seeing the topic, I brought Monopoly money, but that lady at the ticket table was downright snotty, and it brought to my mind whether these Catholics are really practicing what they preach, is what I thought. That's all. I don't mean to be rude.
It's good. I appreciate that. This is an extraordinary question and answer period. The medium is the message. It's quite remarkable. It must be catching. It must be catching. Yes, we have a few minutes yet.
I wanted to ask, are we not, or at least people my generation, perpetuating this whole sense of workaholic mentality on our children by taking away their playtime and organizing it? I mean, we have little leagues for kindergarten now with soccer and football and baseball. I mean, they're 5 and 6 years old and they're trying to play organized sport when they don't even know what it means to run 10 yards. Do we need to, as a church, re-educate our adults?
That's a great point. I did allude to it very briefly in my notes about the organized character of play for children today. Can't help contrasting it with the way it was when I was growing up. It's a very different situation. I mean, they say these kids get burned out at a young age, don't want to play anymore. We got athletic injuries that ought not happen. I always thought there was something interesting where we had to sort of make our own playing field and rake it and figure out how you were going to run it. And so you learn organizational skills or teamwork or something else in the middle of all that. And I still remember seeing some Little League games and guys out in the little kids out in the outfield just daydreaming, looking around, and I mean, just shocking to me. I mean, when I was playing ball, I was into it. I mean, and these kids looking around. I mean, shocking. I was just, what? I still remember that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I agree with the point. It's a problem, isn't it? And how we allow spontaneity to arise in them. What does that do to them? What does it do to the spirit of play? One of the things I kept stressing throughout, play ought to be free. I don't know how free it is for those kids to be involved in those ways. I don't know. I'm big on sports. I love sports. I think they're great. And, some kid's got great potential to be a hockey player, and he gets to play on a traveling team. I mean, if it was my kid, I'd probably be saying, go to it. I don't know. Parents are getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get their kids there to get to the hockey rink. I'm sure so much of sports is out of whack. I try to play that out. Coaches making 5 times, 10 times what the president of the university is making. I mean, something's weird. Something's not right about all that. Privileges for the athletes. So I think there's a lot wrong with it, and we gotta try to be critical of it. And I like the way you put it. Is there something we're supposed to be doing about it? And that's right. Always, I think the governing point is that the gospel is judge of the culture, and our Christian faith is supposed to give us guidance on how we manage our affairs. The church is supposed to help us do that. We ought to preach at times about questions that are engage people like this. It becomes really important. How exactly where you go with that, I don't know. I suppose you could say if we had parents that could stay sensible and not give in to peer pressure, fine, we would do better. That'd be one way to think about it. But how much can you resist that? You got a budding gymnast. See a new Nadia Comaneci, and you say, well, am I going to hold her back? She'll resent it the rest of her life. I got to give her opportunities. It's complex to me, and it's an art, given the family situation, I'm sure, to know the individual and how to go about it. But I know I treasure all those sports things from my youth. I mean, it was shaping influence, bonding with my father, learn certain skills. I think a lot of us learn skills that way. That's why I think one of the great things is women's athletics today. Opportunity for women to play rather than sit around and cheer, or stand around and cheer for men. That's got to be one of the great things. But then that's got a downside. We had to drop our wrestling program here at the university because of women's Title IX. Had to get balance between how many women. So, I mean, did that make sense? So there's all kind of 114-pound guys who can't excel in any other sport, who love to wrestle, who couldn't wrestle here. So, I mean, it's a very ambivalent situation. But that's in the world of sports, that's got to be the great thing that's happened in our time. Opportunity for women to play, compete.
I don't want to offend you, but I didn't like the way you used the term mom in a negative way. I think mothers, when their little infant is small, they already start playing peekaboo games. Then, like I taught all my kids how to roller skate, how to fish, not only how to fly kites, but how to make kites. And, we played chess, checkers, every game there is. And, all we did is play, and I'm not going to feel guilty like Thomas Burton.
Good for you. I suppose we would all commend our mothers for doing that sort of thing, and all the mothers who love their children and give them good example. I was trying to make one single point in using it, and using Dr. Laura's phrase as a touchstone playfully in a way, but a single point is that the danger of identifying ourselves with a role. So even while you're attending to your children all the time, you're still more than that. You're still a subject before God. And after your children are grown and raised, you're still more than a mom. I think many mothers have a problem when their kids are gone, when they don't have that day-to-day active thing, and precisely because they identify themselves with the role. And I include myself in that. Same thing happens if I identify myself with the role as a priest. Anybody, any role, any functionary thing, then we miss this playful aspect of life, this interaction in a playful way with the great God. So that, I was making a single point. I wouldn't want to offend mothers. There's too many of them, and they're too important.
Jim?
And I will, next time, try to make a disclaimer when I give that talk about remembering that it could be heard in a way I didn't intend it. But a single point, we really shouldn't identify ourselves with a role. You're the CEO. I'm the priest. He's the head of deeper dimensions. I mean, okay, that's what we do that, but that's not all we are. If that's all we are, we're in big trouble. We're persons called by name by God, and we do other things besides work. We play, and we pray.
Jim?
It's the last statement.
Okay.
It's short with a very brief response.
I just wanted to point out or to make you aware that in the work culture out there, there is hope. There's a new movement which the company that I've just been hired by has joined. It's called FISH. Some of you may have heard of it, you may not have. In this, they're trying to create a work culture environment of fun, be there, make their day, and choose your attitude. Those are the 4 ideas. And the idea is you can have fun at work, that it's okay. The company specifically says it's okay to have fun at work. There's about 3,000 companies across the country that have adopted this program, and they're finding things like they have waiting lists for people to be hired there. They have people that are not quitting, that are staying there, even though they can make more money other places. So there is a movement of
FISH, did we call it FISH?
Called FISH, and
I think
it's really remarkable, and it's really great to go to work where somebody says, hey, we can have some fun here.
Terry put that forward as a sign of hope, and we'll end with that sign of hope. Thank you. I did a couple times.